This wasn't just a bad performance, but it was a major tactical mistake that raises questions on whether Real Madrid can use this setup at the highest level. And in today's video, we'll break down exactly why the 4-4-2 diamond left them so vulnerable on the flanks, and what tactical changes could fix it. Welcome back to Football Meta. PSG ran out 4-0 winners in the Club World Cup semi-final, controlling possession and dominating the game from start to finish. Personally, I've really enjoyed watching Real Madrid at the Club World Cup, and I think Alonso has shown us some really exciting ideas for the new season. However, in this game, be it because of injuries and suspensions or tactical choices, things definitely did not go to plan. And the first thing we need to touch on is the choice of formation. Alonso opted for the 4-4-2 diamond, a formation where the manager has to make a big choice in how he wants to press. In fact, compared to other formations that are slightly more linear in their matchups, the 4-4-2 diamond needs to choose how they want to close down the fullbacks. You can either choose to push your fullbacks forward and shift the defense over to cover this side of the pitch, giving you more midfield cover but being slightly more vulnerable to switches in play, or alternatively you can press with the two midfielders shifting over to the fullbacks, which allows you to have more cover on the defensive line, but potentially leaves the midfield a little more exposed for quick combinations. Out of the two, the latter is arguably the most common approach, as it is a slightly more linear rotation. However, in this game, it proved to be extremely costly for Real Madrid, and PSG knew exactly how to exploit it. There are three components in this game that allowed PSG to dominate. Firstly, we need to talk about the front three of Vini, Mbappe and Garcia. We've seen good moments from all three of these players in the Club World Cup, but a lot of work needs to be done if these three are to play together, or even if it's just Mbappe and Vini, as their pressing is frankly the main reason why PSG was so dominant in possession. Throughout the whole match, the lack of intensity in the press made it extremely easy for PSG to break forward, and left the whole midfield exposed to all of the rotations further up the pitch. When PSG were in possession, they made sure to keep their backline slightly deeper than they usually would, meaning the front three were often too far away from the back line. PSG's early goals may seem like good fortune taking advantage of mistakes at the back from Real Madrid, but PSG make their own luck, and the intense pressing from Dembele is a perfect contrast to what was lacking for Real Madrid in this game. So this weak press allowed PSG to control possession, but the second key component is down to these rotations out wide onto the fullbacks, and how PSG completely took advantage of this. As the backline rotated possession, either Güler or Bellingham would step out, but because of the distance they had to travel, there was often a lot of time for this ball to be played forward or even into the centre. To add to this problem, the fluid midfield of PSG would vacate the centre of the pitch nearly entirely at times, shifting further and further out wide to receive the ball, overloading the flanks and leaving players like Bellingham completely in two minds on which player needed to be covered. There are so many examples from the first half of these rotations away from the centre, and as PSG circulate possession from flank to flank, they had a lot of easy avenues to move the ball forward. In fact, the vast majority of their progression was coming from these spaces out wide. All of these problems for Real Madrid are extremely evident in the build-up that made it 3-0. Firstly, Mbappe and Vini are trying to shadow mark any passes into the centre, but are not applying any pressure to the players in possession. As Donnarumma moves the ball out wide onto the right flank, Bellingham has to cover a lot of ground to close down Hakimi, completely vacating the centre of the pitch that is occupied by the winger Doué moving centrally. A double 1-2 on the flank from Hakimi and PSG completely rip apart Real Madrid's defence in the blink of an eye. What was great about this performance from PSG was also how quickly they adapted to the changes from Alonso. In fact, as Real Madrid started to adjust these rotations out wide, they started to jump the gun on the press on the fullback. This meant they would make the movement before the centre-back made the pass, which PSG exposed brilliantly on a couple of occasions, by skipping a tempo and going directly into the winger who rotated into the half space. We can see an example of this with Kvaratskhelia in this clip here, with the fullback being closed down and the ball being played directly forward. Although, again, we need to highlight the fact that passes like these are easier if the pressure on the defender is not intense, like we see with Mbappe in this clip. The third and final component that allowed PSG to dominate in this game was their aggressive press, and it's the exact same setup that we saw in the Champions League final, and if Dembele is looking at you like this, then there's not much you can do. The speed at which they closed down the keeper, forcing long balls and aggressively closing down the midfielders meant Real Madrid were rarely dangerous in this match. Vini and Mbappe struggled to latch on to these long balls, and once possession was lost, PSG were quick to get forward and dominate possession once again. The only real occasions Real Madrid had in this game came from counterattacks, but even here weren't able to carve out any seriously threatening chances. Eventually, towards the end of the first half, Alonso did attempt to adapt his defensive shape, switching to a 4-4-2 with Garcia dropping alongside the midfielders. This did allow them to close down the fullbacks a bit quicker, and overall were able to limit the damage in the second half, conceding late on once the game was already done. But this tactical change from Alonso was certainly too little too late. So we saw how they were completely exposed defensively, but the few times in which Real Madrid were able to build an attack, there were some glaring issues in this position as well. In fact, the 4-4-2 diamond is a great shape to use with more fluid and dynamic players, as the close proximity in the centre can lead to some interesting combinations, like we've seen a lot from Real Madrid in recent years. However, with a manager like Alonso who wants to give his team a bit more structure, this shape means it's difficult to occupy the space out wide. It requires either the fullbacks to be aggressive and join the attack, or for the midfielders and attackers to rotate into these positions. But against PSG, because the fullbacks were often pinned back by the wingers, it meant it wasn't easy for them to join the attack. And because of the aggressive press, Real Madrid tried to get the ball forward quickly, so would find themselves in a position in the centre but with little option to move the ball out wide. There's a great example of this happening at the end of the first half, with Real Madrid attempting to build an attack but finding themselves completely overloading the centre, but with no real progression opportunities on the flank. There were a few moments in the second half where they were able to stretch the defence more consistently, like this decent chance for Mbappe coming after some neat combinations out wide. But the final shot is an accurate reflection of Real Madrid's performance in this game. Overall, it was always going to be an uphill battle for Real Madrid in this game, but some tactical choices left them completely exposed to this PSG team. Personally, I think the back five that Alonso has been trialling at the Club World Cup could be the perfect solution for Real Madrid next season. It gives them great defensive cover with the wingbacks out wide, and offensively it does allow them to get a lot of players forward on the attack. However, because Alonso is so reliant on an aggressive press to regain possession quickly, I'm not sure if Mbappe and Vini working together is the solution, as both of them do not have the willingness to press effectively and efficiently, and is one of the main reasons why PSG was so dominant in this game. But what do you think of this system? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you all after the Club World Cup final.